Welcome to this explainer. You know, we usually read about history through the lens of massive battles or these grand geopolitical shifts. But today we're going to look at it through a totally different lens, raw, staggering, and honestly sometimes baffling human endurance. We're talking about historical figures who defied absolutely impossible odds. I mean, we'll even be looking at a guy who survived a subatomic particle beam straight through the head. It's wild.
So, what does it actually take to survive the impossible? Have you ever had like a really bad day at work or just a string of terrible luck and you start to wonder exactly how much a human being can actually take? Well, the people we're analyzing today, they pushed the boundaries of that question further than pretty much anyone else on record.
Just look at the sheer escalation of danger here. We've got a woman who went down with not one, but two of the most famous sinking ships of the Edwardian era. We've got a soldier whose medical file literally reads like a fictional action movie, and an engineer who is directly under the blast radius of two separate atomic bombs. It's just unbelievable what these ordinary yet completely extraordinary people lived through.
Here's our menu of madness for today's explainer. We're starting with the unsinkable stewardess, then the indestructible soldier, surviving two atomic bombs, and finishing up with the psychology of survival. All right, let's jump right in.
Section 1. The Unsinkable Stewardess. We're starting with Violet Jessup, an ocean liner stewardess who basically faced the absolute worst the sea and society could possibly throw at her.
Now, before we even talk about disasters, you have to realize that working-class women like Violet were already navigating super strict moral codes and grueling labor just to get out to sea. In the late 19th and early 20th centuries, maritime work was, as you'd guess, heavily dominated by men. The victualling department on these massive floating palaces was one of the few ways women could enter the workforce, but they had to act absolutely perfect to get a spot. Actually, get this, Violet had to intentionally dress down and try to look less attractive just to get hired, all to avoid allegedly tempting the crew. I mean, can you imagine?
But the sea did offer something really valuable. It kind of loosened those rigid societal standards, offering women far more independence and mobility than a typical domestic servant back on land. Rather than being stuck in a single household 24/7, stewardesses had the autonomy to basically choose their voyages, acting almost like freelancers. It was this really unique pocket of freedom in the public sphere where women could fiercely protect their independence.
That said, working in the victualling department was intense, non-stop work. Violet had to make beds, serve tea, comfort seasick passengers, the whole shebang. But beyond all that physical labor, she had to constantly dodge abusive superiors. Since they were in a heavily male-dominated space, these women faced constant threats. Violet herself actually thwarted a terrifying assault attempt from a purser, and this was while she was recovering from malaria. Later on, she got fired from a completely different company just because she refused the captain's inappropriate advances. So you see, she had developed an incredibly thick skin long before she ever faced a shipwreck.
Which brings us to her unsinkable record. The crucial takeaway here is that surviving the Titanic in 1912 and then the Britannic in 1916 wasn't just blind luck. It was a testament to that fierce fortitude she honed every single day. When the Titanic was going down, she was ordered into a lifeboat just to show non-English-speaking passengers that it was safe. Someone literally just thrust a baby into her arms to save as she got in. Then, 4 years later, when the hospital ship Britannic struck a mine, she was so composed that she made sure to go back and grab her toothbrush before abandoning ship. Why? Because it was the one thing she really regretted leaving behind on the Titanic. You just can't make this stuff up.
All right, Section 2, the Indestructible Soldier. We're leaving the ocean behind and heading straight into the trenches to meet Adrien Carton Duarte, a man who, well, cheerfully threw himself into the line of fire.
I absolutely love this quote right here. Frankly, I enjoyed the war. It perfectly captures this sort of bizarre, joyful enthusiasm he had for the most horrific years of global conflict. You have to understand, Carton Duarte was not some general barking orders from the safety of a chateau. He actually lied about his age to fight in the Boer War down in South Africa, took a bullet to the stomach and groin, and honestly, that was just his warm-up for World War I.
Just listen to this catalog of insanity. In World War I alone, he was shot in the face, which blinded his left eye. During the Second Battle of Ypres, German shrapnel shattered his left hand. And when a field doctor refused to amputate his dangling, useless fingers, Sir Adrian literally tore them off himself. No joke. Oh, and he also took a machine gun bullet straight through the back of his head at Devil's Wood, which somehow miraculously missed his spinal cord. It got to the point where his recovery hospital in Park Lane just kept his personal pajamas washed and ready for his next inevitable visit.
His completely fearless leadership on the Somme, picture this guy with a black eye patch and an empty sleeve, earned him the Victoria Cross, the absolute highest military honor in the UK. Not to mention the fierce loyalty of his men. One historian actually described him as looking like an elegant pirate. He'd literally pull pins from grenades with his teeth and hurl them with his one good arm, just entirely unfazed by the carnage going on all around him.
And amazingly, his military career didn't just end with World War I. During that chaotic interwar period, when borders were shifting everywhere, as you can see here, he served as Winston Churchill's representative in Poland. He was navigating the insanely turbulent Soviet-Polish War in 1920, right in the thick of the diplomatic and military maneuvering as the Red Army advanced. Naturally, he survived a few more plane crashes and ambushes along the way, because of course he did.
Man, World War II rolls around, and yep, he's back at it. He survives another plane crash, this time into the Mediterranean, swims to shore, and gets captured by the Italians. So now he's a highly visible prisoner of war at 62 years old with one eye and one hand. But his drive for freedom, still completely relentless. He spends 7 months digging a tunnel out of the prison, breaks out, and somehow evades capture for 8 days disguised as an Italian peasant. Keep in mind he spoke zero Italian and had a highly distinct look, to say the least. After all that, the guy eventually died peacefully of old age at 83.
Okay, Section 3, Surviving 2 Atomic Bombs. Now we reach the really terrifying climax of extreme survival, with naval engineer Tsutomu Yamaguchi in August of 1945.
3 kilometers. That single number is just astounding. It marks the exact distance Yamaguchi stood from the epicenters of not just 1, but 2 atomic detonations. He remains the only person officially recognized by the Japanese government as a survivor of both the Hiroshima and the Nagasaki atomic bombs.
Let's map this out chronologically so we can truly grasp what a harrowing week this was. On August 6th, he's on a business trip in Hiroshima when the little boy bomb is dropped. He sees a flash brighter than 1,000 suns and dives into a drainage ditch. He's thrown into the air, his eardrums burst, and he gets severe burns all across his upper body. He somehow survives the night in a shelter, and incredibly, the very next morning he boards a train to go back to his hometown. The problem? That hometown was Nagasaki. So, despite having terrible burns and a high fever, he literally drags himself into work at Mitsubishi on August 9th. He's standing right there in his boss's office trying to explain this impossible apocalyptic blast he had just lived through in Hiroshima. And his boss doesn't believe him, thinks he's crazy. And right at that exact moment, a second blinding white flash fills the room. The Fat Man bomb detonates. Once again, he is just 3 kilometers away from ground zero. And once again, he survives.
As you'd expect, life after the flash was agonizing. His wounds reopened, he lost his hair, and he suffered from severe radiation sickness. But slowly, defying literally every medical expectation, he recovered. And instead of letting this unparalleled trauma break him, he channeled it. He started writing poems about his experience, and he used his unique status as a double survivor to passionately campaign for global nuclear disarmament, even meeting with world leaders. And just like our previous survivors, he lived a remarkably long life, passing away at age 93 in 2010.
All right, Section 4, the psychology of survival. Now, before we tie all these astonishing narratives together, we absolutely have to look at one final, terrifyingly scientific anomaly that perfectly defines this idea of mind over matter. I'm talking about the unbelievable true story of Soviet scientist Anatoli Bugorski.
So get this. In 1978, Bugorski accidentally put his head inside a working U-70 synchrotron particle accelerator. A 76 giga-electron-volt proton beam shot directly through his skull and his brain. He reported seeing a flash brighter than 1,000 suns, instantly absorbing a massive 300,000 rads of radiation. To put that in perspective, that is a dose that should have killed him on the spot, no questions asked. Yet because the beam was so narrowly focused, it essentially burned a clean path straight through his brain tissue without destroying the surrounding crucial networks. He not only survived and went on to finish his PhD, but the left side of his face, which was paralyzed by the beam, completely stopped aging. It became this bizarre, permanent anti-aging paradox. Just like our other survivors, his physical, neurological, and psychological refusal to die basically defied all known science.
So I'll leave you with this question to ponder today. How do you face your everyday adversities compared to these historical titans? You know, when our daily frustrations start to mount, looking back at the unkillable fortitude of Violet, Adrian, Tsutomu, and Anatoli really puts our whole reality into perspective. Are we all secretly capable of this kind of survival, or are some people just built differently? Thanks for joining me for this explainer. And hey, never underestimate what the human body and mind can truly endure.